What a day of college football that we just witnessed yesterday. It was absolutely insane from start to finish. This is been insane. Absolutely insane. And it was just over a month ago that South Carolina was 3-3 on the year, coming off a heartbreaking loss to Alabama in Tuscaloosa, October 12th. South Carolina was 3-3 after that game and made it clear they never wanted to feel the way they did after that game again. And boy, have they made that clear over these last 5 games, proving to everyone that this isn't this isn't your ordinary South Carolina. This isn't the team that most of us have grown up watching and seeing the bad and the downs of the letdowns and all this sort of stuff. This team is different. Now they're 8-3 on the year after picking up a 56-12 win over Wofford on Saturday. And dare I say, we have to have a conversation. What is going on, everyone? Happy Sunday. Welcome in to GC Live Sunday Reset with your host, myself, yours truly, Jack Veltri. Appreciate all of you guys tuning in. And like the title of this stream says, and good morning to you, Frederick, we are going to be having that conversation. And in case you're not picking up what I'm putting down, South Carolina might have a shot at the playoff. I'm saying it. Like, you may not want to believe it, and I know most of you guys watching probably want to believe it because, I mean, who wouldn't want to see South Carolina in the playoffs if you're a South Carolina fan? But, I mean, look, after being 3-3, I don't think anyone had thoughts of the playoff in mind. And I bring that up just because that was a game that, like, it felt like South Carolina could have definitely won that game against Alabama. And arguably maybe they should have in some cases, but they just weren't able to get it done. And then obviously after that, steamrolling Oklahoma, and then everything in November has happened. And we've gotten to the point where there's a plausible conversation to be had, especially with everything else that happened around the country yesterday in college football. South Carolina needed a lot of help, and boy, did they get plenty of it. But we're going to talk about that in just a short while here. First, before we get going, and again, happy Sunday to everyone. Hope you guys are all having a fantastic morning like I am. It's been another long Journey's night in the morning. Was up work until about 2:30 last night because craziness in college football and everything in between, getting stories up and stuff. But we're here. We're ready to talk some ball. And first, we're going to talk about our great sponsor, main sponsor right above me here, Clint Hammond of CMG Home Loans. CMG Home Loans. If you are, maybe you're like me, you're living in an apartment right now and you want to take that next step and potentially buy a home, or maybe you're just in the market for a home in general, or you're needing help with your mortgage, but you don't know where to start. Well, I've got great news for you. Clint Hammond of CMG Home Loans can help you out big time. He's a lifelong Gamecock fan, a longtime supporter of Gamecock Central and all of our GC Live programs, and he's been in the mortgage industry for more than 20 years. So he knows exactly what he's doing, and he's the perfect guy to help you because he's just like all of you guys. He is a Gamecock through and through. So if you're interested, he'll take you through the process step by step and help you out and put you on the right path. So if you're interested, again, call 803-422-6797. You can also go to ClintHammond.com, or the NMLS number for him is 71597. So want to thank Clint for being a wonderful sponsor of all of our GC Live programs. All right, so before we get into the conversation that we're going to have, whether you want to hear it or not, and I know most of y'all are probably ready to hear it by this point because I think South Carolina is in a spot where Saturday against Clemson might be the biggest game in the history of the Palmetto Bowl, without question. There have been some big games in the past, like 2011, 12, 13. Those are all great matchups where South Carolina and Clemson are both ranked really high. But that is different. And I say that because that was during the BCS era where neither team was going to the national championship game, where it was just the top two teams. Now with the expanded playoffs, a lot could change. So we're foreshadowing like crazy right now, but we're gonna get into that in just a short while. I promise. And it's hard to forget, but we had a football game yesterday, and one that was a little bit of a struggle for a little bit. And that's ultimately what the show is about. We talk about these games and break down what happened the night before with South Carolina. And yesterday was kind of a strange game. South Carolina beat Wofford really handedly, 56-12. But man, they came out sleepwalking at the beginning of that game. I think that's probably the best way to put it. Sluggish, slow. I mean, it was rough to start the game. Literally from the first play, when Wofford ran a screen pass for 63 yards to open the game, and right away in the blink of an eye, it's Wofford down in the red zone on the first play of the game. And I made a bad joke yesterday. I'll admit it. Someone asked me on the Insiders Forum on the game thread yesterday, well before the game had started, we winning yet? And I replied, it's 7-0 Wofford. And after that play, I'm not going to lie, y'all. I know you guys were coming after me, but I was in the press box. I'm like, oh, no. Did I just jinx it? And I know some of you guys probably hate me after that. But again, it's not intentional. It was literally just a joke. And again, it doesn't matter now because South Carolina won handily. But it was not the ideal start. And I think Wofford, give them a lot of credit. They haven't had a great year. 5-6 in the FCS. No playoffs for them, obviously. But they had nothing to lose yesterday. Last game of the year, you knew probably some trickery was coming, which of course it did. And it was just like they had nothing to lose. And South Carolina, whether they did or not, I think it's just human nature to overlook a team like this that you know you're probably going to beat by a lot, just because look at the matchup that's coming up next week. You have a potential top 15 matchup with your arch rival next week. So it makes sense that, like, yeah, there's going to be a little bit of kind of just glossing over this game and not taking it super serious. It's kind of like my perfect movie analogy here. Think back to Rocky 1976 when Apollo Creed needs to pick a fighter, just a random fighter, because the guy he's supposed to fight, like a top 10 fighter at the time, got hurt and wasn't able to fight. So he finds a random guy, and it's Rocky Balboa. So it's kind of like that. And then Rocky comes out and knocks down Apollo in the first round. And it's like, okay, now I got to take this serious. So it's kind of like that. That was my initial thought when I'm like, all right, well, it's kind of like, it kind of is like the movie a little bit here, where the heavy underdog, 42.5-point underdog, mind you, comes out swinging right out of the gate. And then it's like, all right, South Carolina's got to lock in. And eventually they did. They held Wofford to a field goal. And it was a really rough first quarter, honestly, just in general. Like, South Carolina had the lead by the end of the quarter, but there was a 50-yard touchdown pass from Lenora Sellers to Dale Von Campbell that was wiped off the board because of an ineligible receiver downfield. There were multiple penalties. I mean, it was a mess. But I will say, as the game kind of wore on, especially in that second half, South Carolina did play a lot better. Like, they came out swinging right out of the gates in the second half, and they were really able to build the lead. And now I will bring this up. I think that might have been the worst special teams performance I've seen from South Carolina at least in the Beamer era. I'm going to be quite honest. And if you agree or disagree, I don't know. But, like, I think a lot of you can probably agree with that, because we've seen how good South Carolina special teams have been under Pete Lembo, who's now the head coach of Buffalo, over the last few years. I mean, Beamer ball, with South Carolina what you're getting. It's good special teams. It's not just the trickery and stuff. You're getting great special teams performances, and yesterday was not one of them, not even close. In that third quarter, I bring this up because South Carolina was rolling. I mean, they just had 2 touchdowns, and then they were forcing Wofford to punt on a 3-and-out, and it's a short 32-yard punt that goes off of Peyton Williams. And I think at the time, again, I haven't been able to rewatch the game yet because ESPN Plus wants to be a pain in the butt today for whatever reason. But I will say, watching it initially, I think normally in that situation, at least from when I remember playing football, like you're supposed to yell, Peter, Peter, like, get away from the ball, get away from the ball, because it's a short punt. Don't touch it. And the punt returner on that play was not going to catch the ball. So get away from the ball and don't touch it. What happened? The ball hits off South Carolina and Wofford recovers. And fortunately, South Carolina's defense held Wofford to a field goal, thanks to Brian Thomas getting a big third down sack. But that wasn't the only blunder. There were two in the second quarter that were just, it was just bad. Wofford ran not one, but two fakes on the same drive in the second quarter. Nothing came of it, but it should have potentially, because Wofford ran a fake punt on a jet sweep motion pass where it was the same play as what happened in the Notre Dame Gator Bowl 2 years ago. Go back and watch the highlights. Fourth quarter, the score is tied at 31. Notre Dame, I think this is on the drive where they took the lead to make it 38-31. They run the same exact play. Guy comes across the gunner or whoever it is, the barricade of guys. The one guy flips it to the guy in motion, and he comes around the corner and gets the first down. So it's the same exact play. And yes, yell Peter. I got no idea why. That was always what I was taught when I played high school football. Like it was, it was, I just didn't understand it, but I'm like, okay, whatever, I'll roll with it. But it was like, yeah, you got to yell, Peter, Peter, Peter. Like, I don't know why, but I don't know why I remember that either, because I haven't played high school football since, like, it's been at least like 7-8 years. It's gosh, time's flying by, man. But yeah, so I don't know what their protocol is at South Carolina, but I'm assuming it's something along the same lines. So look, the fake punt was, South Carolina was ready for it, according to Shane Beamer. Like, they knew that Wofford was probably going to run some trickery in this game. I mean, they talked about it all week, and it started during Tuesday's team meeting, and it didn't seem to make a difference just because Wofford got a good playoff and it worked. Now, later in that same drive, Wofford's getting ready to kick a field goal. And keep in mind, on the fake punt, a timeout was called right before the play, and you knew the fake punt was going to become, like, I think everyone knew, because I think Wofford was at maybe like the 30-yard line, and you're like, oh my God, they're totally going to run a fake here. Like, this is the perfect spot to do so. You're not punting from the plus territory 30-yard line. And then on the fake field goal, Wofford calls a timeout right before. And as soon as they got lined up to kick, I think they slightly shifted the formation a little bit. And Shane Beamer recognized, like, hey, something's up here. And maybe he should have called a timeout in that moment. I don't know. But Wofford runs a fake field goal for a touchdown on a pass. And it was a great play. And it would have made the score, I believe, 14-9 at the time. And eventually it became that score anyway. But the point is, Wofford had pulled off a great play, but it was all for naught because of a false start penalty that wiped the play out. So South Carolina got a huge break. And if you didn't watch the game and you hear about it that, oh yeah, South Carolina didn't play well on special teams, you'd probably think like, oh, it can't be that bad. They won 56-12. Man, it was rough. Like, really, like, genuinely, like, I'm being truthfully honest here. That was awful. Like, not good enough, and not what you expect from South Carolina special teams. So it's got to be better. It's got to be cleaned up. But I think a lot of people have full faith that it will, especially with Beamer being a special teams guru himself. So we'll have to see what happens. And Matt Sellers, I guess he's just now joining the conversation, said, morning, was special teams concerning to you as it was to me? At what point do y'all ask media, or as media ask Shane about the drop-off in special teams from last year to this year? Yeah, so good morning, Matt. Yeah, I was definitely concerned with the special teams. Again, I just went on a whole little tangent kind of about it. The special teams was awful yesterday. I did ask Shane what exactly happened on the special teams situations in that game, and I have a whole story coming out on it at 1:00 later today. So go to GamecockCentral.com to go ahead and read that. And while you're at it, if you're not already, go ahead and subscribe to GamecockCentral.com. Join it. Join the team. Join the family. It's awesome. A lot of great stories coming out. I think we published probably more than just about anyone. I don't know that for sure, but it definitely feels like it considering we typically publish between like 30 to 50 stories over these next few days, and it's a lot of content. And we also had the Insiders Forum, so there's a lot of great conversation going on over there with the playoff and what happened yesterday in college football and just South Carolina-Clemson in general. It's like it is. I can firsthand say it is an exciting time to be talking about South Carolina football right now. And so my point is, if you're not a part of Gamecock Central yet, if you're not on the Insiders Forum, if you're not a subscriber, I highly suggest doing it. No better time to do so than right now. I promise you guys that. I guarantee it. Anyway, and also go ahead and subscribe to our YouTube page, Gamecock Central. It's free. Just literally click subscribe and give this video a thumbs up if you guys are enjoying it. But I will say, man, special teams yesterday was not good. And I did ask Shane about it, like I said. I didn't ask him like the way you kind of phrased it, like with the drop off, but I mean, does it get better than Pete Lembo? I don't think so. I think Joe D does a good job, but I don't think it's never going to be as good as Pete Lembo, at least not right now, but we'll have to see. Again, there were so many mistakes yesterday, and that's stuff that maybe you would see like once or twice throughout a season or every few games, but like not as much as it did yesterday. Like South Carolina is normally the team to catch teams off guard with these types of plays and stuff, but it was Wofford doing so. And hats off to them because they ran some really great plays in this game to make it happen. And it is what it is, but you got to learn from it. And if history shows anything, you go back to the Clemson South Carolina game 2 years ago. There were, if I'm remembering correctly, there were a few special teams plays in that game that really proved to be pivotal with, I think Clemson ran like the muddle huddle or something on a kick return and they botched it and South Carolina recovered the ball. My memory is fuzzy on that, but I will say, like, we know special teams could play a huge role in this game on Saturday out in Death Valley. So you got to clean it up ASAP, and I'm sure they're going to this week. Like, I have no doubt about it. And we'll see what happens. I wish we could get to talk to Joe D during the week for press conferences with the other coordinators like we would with Pete last year. And Pete was always so great analyzing special teams and stuff. But we haven't been able to really talk to Jody since the summer. So, again, this is the kind of the time where you'd love to hear the thoughts of what was going on Saturday. And we did from Beamer and other players and stuff. But it would be nice to hear from the main guy himself. But I understand. So it's not really that big of a deal. But getting more into the game in general before we kind of turn the page towards Clemson and other things, because, again, it's 56-12. Lenore Sellers balled out yesterday. Say what you will about his interception. 85% completion rate, 307 passing yards, 3 touchdowns. He's the first Gamecock quarterback since Spencer Rattler, who was at the game yesterday, to throw for more than 300 yards in back-to-back games. So, look, Sellers is coming along very nicely. He has played very well this season, and yesterday was another example of that. Rocket Sanders, I thought, had a good game. Dale Von Campbell, holy smokes, he balled out yesterday. He has been phenomenal. And speaking of special teams, Dale Von made an absolutely lethal hit on special teams yesterday on the punt returner for Wofford. I have a story coming out on Dale Von at 11:30, about 40 minutes here. So as soon as we're done on this live stream, go to GamecockCentral.com to check that out. Shameless plug. But I will say, I think Dale Von is really coming along nicely. He has been a unsung hero of this team as of late. He had the big catches against Missouri last week, but he was awesome yesterday. 120 yards receiving. Should have had 170 at least. But, again, that one touchdown he had got wiped off by an eligible receiver downfield, which is Vershawn Lee. So, look, Dale Von really had a great game yesterday, and it's good to see him coming along the way he has, especially this late in the year and was his final games of college football. So, great game for him. Luke Doty got in there and started yesterday. with how banged up the tight ends are, and he had 3 catches for 17 yards. Gage Larvadain had a touchdown. Nick Harbor had a touchdown. And can we also talk about, this was awesome. Well, Jawarn Howell had a touchdown. Robbie Ashford had a touchdown. The final touchdown of the game, Bradley Dunn, who was a walk-on running back, turned into a scholarship guy earlier this season, was rewarded with a scholarship, and he had the final touchdown rush of the game, and he runs into the corner of the end zone. It's like 9 seconds left to go in the game. The game's already out of hand, and the entire bench seemingly clears out and runs over to Dunn in the end zone and just celebrates him. Like, that is the stuff that you love to see. Like, that is what senior day is all about. Like, again, the game wasn't pretty yesterday for South Carolina. There were a lot of mistakes made, but man, like, that was really cool to see. Like, that is what I'm going to take away from that game. I said it yesterday on Moving the Chains, my post-game video on YouTube here, but that is what it's all about, man. Like, again, we could talk about Lenore Sellers having the great game and the special teams debacle and stuff and all these different things that happened during the game stat-wise. But, like, getting to see the seniors get a huge win to end their careers at Willie B, that's awesome. Because, again, the seniors last year, Shane Beamer and players brought this up yesterday, the last game for the seniors at home last year was the Clemson game where they lost. And that was obviously a heartbreaking defeat because you weren't going to a bowl game. And look, I know it's Wofford, but a win is a win. And you kind of got to see everyone get in and play. I think you had 74 guys play yesterday, which is really, really cool. And that's what a game like yesterday is all about. So big win for the Gamecocks, 8-3 on the year. They've won 5 games in a row for the first time since 2013. And now we get into the conversation you all have been waiting for. Sheriff asks, what are we going to? And this is in reference to what bowl game are we going to? Well, they might not be going to a bowl game. Is it time to say that South Carolina has a chance to go to the college football playoff? I mean, look, if we're wrong, okay. But, like, there is no denying yesterday has seemingly changed a lot of the conversation because had some teams not lost against unranked opponents, and keep in mind, a lot of these teams that we're going to talk about here in a second that lost yesterday were in front of had been in front of South Carolina in the college football playoff rankings. There were 5 teams. I'm sorry, I think there were 6 teams that lost yesterday. And here we go. Number 5, Indiana, lost to number 2, Ohio State. Number 7, Alabama, lost to unranked Oklahoma. Number 9, Ole Miss, lost to unranked Florida. Number 14, BYU, lost to number 21, Arizona State. Here's the big one. Number 15, Texas A&M, lost to unranked Auburn. And number 16 ranked Colorado, lost to unranked Kansas. That was what happened yesterday in the sport that we all love. And this year's been insane. And I feel like we say this almost every week. But yesterday was pure chaos. And from a South Carolina standpoint, you knew you needed teams to lose in front of you. You needed some help to even get in the conversation of the playoff because you have 3 losses. And that's the main talking point of people saying, oh, South Carolina can't make the playoff because they finished 9-3 and they 3 losses, and you're not putting a 3-loss team in the playoff. Well, there's a real chance now that an SEC team with 3 losses might get into the playoff, and it could be Texas A&M if they win the SEC championship. First, they have to beat Texas, and then if they win that game, they go to Atlanta, and if they beat Georgia, they're going to the college football playoff as an auto bid. So, look, I think the whole narrative about 3-loss teams not getting into the playoff is just – I don't think that's going to – I think there's going to be a 3-loss team in the playoff, I think. And I think potentially it could be South Carolina. And I also think if A&M kind of plays its cards right, they could get into the playoff as well. So, and I think there might be a 3-loss Big 12 team in the playoff. Like, who's to say, man? Like, this year's been wild, and it's not because these teams are bad by any means. It's just there's been so much beating up on each other around the sport this year to where it's like, I mean, look, I don't really remember 2007 that much because I was only 7 years old at the time, and I really wasn't fully getting invested in college football like I am now. But like, I mean, I've seen the tape and stuff. Like, that year was nuts, and I've heard people say 2007 is probably better than this year. But I will argue that this season, 2024, has been more nuts than literally just about everything. And that game out at Auburn last night was, if you watched, it was nuts. Like, absolutely crazy. And it was just insane. And Auburn, my God. I haven't really watched much of Auburn this year, but just a quick assessment on them. I watched them for the fourth quarter and overtime last night. I see why they were 4-6. That team makes so many mistakes. My God. It was false starts, slipping. It was making mental errors in defense. I mean, holy smokes, man. That team is, I mean, they're lucky they won last night because Texas A&M in the fourth overtime, I believe, dropped a pass in the end zone on the 2-point conversion, and it should have been caught. But again, A&M didn't catch it. Now they're 8-3 on the year, and A&M controls its own destiny from here. But I think for South Carolina, you got just about everything you needed yesterday. You got your chaos, you got your win, and now I think we are talking about maybe we'll have to see what happens on Tuesday in the CFP rankings. And me personally, I think South Carolina is probably going to be ranked somewhere around 14 to 15. It wouldn't shock me if the committee put South Carolina at 15. And we also have to keep this in mind. Ole Miss and Alabama both lost yesterday, and they both lost to 5-5 teams. Like, that is not pretty, especially for Alabama losing 24-3, and that's a common opponent for South Carolina when they beat Oklahoma 35-9. And look, the argument's going to be like, okay, does head-to-head matter because Ole Miss and Alabama both beat South Carolina earlier this year? At the same time, though, the committee's kind of proven that head-to-head doesn't matter as much because if you remember, LSU, who had beaten South Carolina earlier in the year, was placed behind South Carolina in the CFP rankings after they had lost one of their most recent games. So, again, I don't know what the CFP rankings are going to be. I don't think it really even matters if Ole Miss and Alabama are ahead of South Carolina because, number one, Ole Miss and Bama, they both have virtually – I mean, they're not meaningless because they're rivalry games, but from the standpoint of moving up in the playoff picture, the games they have next week are not going to help against Mississippi State and Auburn. Like, those are teams that are both under 500 right now. And so if Bama and Ole Miss beat them, it's not going to really move the needle too much, in my opinion. But for South Carolina, you got a date with Clemson in Death Valley on Saturday, a potential top 15 showdown that I think, if I'm being honest, it should be for a spot in the college football playoff. That game should have implications bigger than anything we've ever seen before on the line. And I think if you're Carolina, I think they're going to be able to handle the pressure well. You know it's going to come this week. You know in media availability with players and stuff this week that it's going to be all about, the foreshadowing of people. Like, there will be questions asked like, how does this game feel like a playoff game? Does this game have extra implications? Like, what would this win mean? Like, with the playoffs and all. Like, again, I don't know how it's going to be phrased, but questions like that are going to be asked. And I think if you're South Carolina, look, all you can do at this point is go 9-3 and leave no doubt, essentially. Like, that should be the goal at this point. I've said it for weeks now. It should be leave no doubt and see what happens. Like, make the committee's job as tough as possible. Make it to where they can't leave you out. Because let's be real, South Carolina, I honestly think, is one of the 12 best teams in college football right now. And that's the other thing. What have you done for me lately should matter a ton. Like, okay, like if we're going to talk about let's put this in the Clemson standpoint for a second, not to get too far off from South Carolina here. Let's put this from the Clemson standpoint. Let's say Clemson, and I don't even want to say it, but let's say Clemson finishes the year 10-2 somehow, and they're the ones that come out on top. The whole "what have you done for me lately" argument, does the committee take the Georgia loss into effect? Because remember, Clemson got drubbed by Georgia earlier in the year in week 1. And so how much is that game going to be taken into consideration? You know what I mean? And it's the same thing for South Carolina. Like, Carolina's got the longest winning streak in the SEC right now with 5 games, and they've beaten quality opponents week after week. Like, and if people are going to want to talk about, oh, well, they lost to Ole Miss, they lost to LSU, they lost to Alabama, that happened in the first 2 months of the season. I mean, since middle of October, October 19th, South Carolina has been playing like a championship-level football team. They haven't lost a game. They've been blowing teams out. Here's another interesting thing, and maybe it doesn't have as much weight because Vanderbilt's now 6-5 on the year, but they are like the only team this year to absolutely throttle Vanderbilt. I mean, they won 28-7 in Nashville. I mean, Alabama lost 40-35 out in Nashville earlier this year, or 45-40, whatever it was. And LSU's barely scraping by a win against Vanderbilt in Death Valley at night. That's crazy. Isn't Death Valley the place where dreams go to die? I mean, unless you're Alabama going in there and dominating LSU. But, like, I mean, look, that win over Vanderbilt should hold some weight. Alabama losing to Oklahoma in Norman, getting demolished. Like, 24-3 is a butt whooping. South Carolina went in there and made that game over in the first 5 minutes, winning 35-9. I mean, look, say what you will. And Ole Miss lost to Florida, and they've lost to Kentucky. South Carolina demolished Kentucky in Lexington. Ole Miss lost to them at home. And I know that goes against the argument of, early season losses shouldn't matter as much. I mean, like, they're going to hold some weight, obviously. But I think South Carolina has the resume to get into the playoff. Like, if they finish the year 9-3, this win over Clemson if they do get it, this win is going to move them up. Like, they are going to climb over whoever it is. Like, okay, I know people are saying, like, Arizona State, they're worried that South Carolina might get jumped by them. It wouldn't shock me. But is BYU really that good? Like, can Arizona State go from 21 all the way up to, like, if they got ahead of both Carolina and Clemson, they'd probably be up to around like 12. And you also have to consider, how far is Alabama going to drop? Because they're at 7, and they only scored 3 points against Oklahoma, who, mind you, had just clinched a bowl game bid yesterday to go 6-5. So how far does Alabama drop? How far does Ole Miss drop? Ole Miss is at number 9. They lost 24-17 to Florida in Gainesville. But do you put them ahead of South Carolina because of the head-to-head and the fact that they are the only team this year to actually give South Carolina a butt whooping? And what do you do with Indiana? I think Indiana is the most problematic one, because more likely than not, they're going to finish the year 11-1, and it would be hard to leave an 11-1 team out of the playoff, especially considering they were number 5 yesterday. But let's be honest, man, and I don't care. Indiana's not a playoff team. I don't care what Kirk Cignetti has to say or what any Indiana folk has to say. Indiana is not a playoff team. They have one of the worst strength of schedules in the country. It's well in the hundreds. Oh, and by the way, they got demolished by Ohio State yesterday, and it could have been worse. So, like, does that mean Ohio State's really good? Yeah, probably. They're a top 2 team in the country. At the same time, Indiana is this so-called top 5 team in the country, and they had no business being in that game yesterday. And they got crushed. I mean, I don't know how far the committee is going to drop them. You should be penalized for not having a good strength of schedule. You should be penalized. Like, okay, you play the game, you win the games you're supposed to play. I get it. I know the sentiment was that, okay, they have Michigan in Washington on the schedule, both teams that made it to the national championship game last year. And not everyone I think in the moment, it's like not everyone expected them to have the drop off that they have had this year, where Michigan is barely going to a bowl game. And I don't even know what's up with Washington, but they both have problems. And it's like, that's not on Indiana for the fact of these two teams now suddenly stink. That's not their problem. However, like the numbers are there. You had your chance to prove that you belong in the playoff picture. For sure, you were getting in guaranteed if you beat Ohio State yesterday. But now it's like, I think it's a 50-50 shot. And I don't think they should be in the playoff because we saw what happened yesterday. And do you really want a team that has no business being in the playoff getting their, what looked like? I'm just being honest. And I think when you stack it up, like, okay, if it comes down to like Indiana and South Carolina, look, Indiana might have 2 less losses than South Carolina, but put it this way, like South Carolina would the schedule that South Carolina has, Indiana could not handle, in my opinion. Like, I think for Carolina, if they had the schedule that Indiana had, I think Carolina fares pretty well, to be honest. So, look, it's a long discussion. There's a lot to talk about, and it's very argue. But it's just, it would be a real travesty, I think, if South Carolina wins next week. And mind you, if they win in convincing fashion too, that only elevates things like crazy. It's just, if it came down to a team like Indiana getting in the playoff over South Carolina, I think that'd be disappointing, I think. And it's not SEC bias. It's not anything like that. It's straight up the facts. South Carolina is playing great football right now. They're playing just about as good as anyone in the country. And we're going to be getting into that point where the issue with the 4-team playoff over the years was the fact of the 5th and 6th team that always got left out, the first 2 out. The argument was always, oh, this should have been in and all this and that. And I mean, that was always the case every single year. And, the precedent was kind of set last year with Florida State going 13-0, winning the ACC championship. And it's a different situation because their starting quarterback was done for the year, and they looked like a completely different team after Jordan Travis went out. But the committee left them out and put Alabama in. And you can argue whether it was right or wrong. But the point is, I think they have the foresight to see that Florida State probably would have gotten smacked by, who was the top seed? Michigan? Like, it's possible. And the counterpoint's going to be that, oh, well, Florida State wouldn't have had guys sit out and stuff in the Rose Bowl. Well, I mean, look, who knows how it goes, but Florida State is a different team without their top quarterback in there. And I mean, EXO is right. I think Bama belonged in the playoff over Florida State last year. And you can even make the argument that like TCU and Baylor could have potentially been in the playoff back in the first year of it, when Ohio State snuck in with a 59-0 win over Wisconsin in the Big Ten title game to propel themselves to get in. So my point is, someone's going to be unhappy as the 13th and 14th seeds in the CFP rankings. It would not shock me if it's South Carolina. That is kind of just how it feels like. Yeah, they're doing everything they can to get in. Yeah, they've gotten help around the country. But will it be enough, man? And this whole argument doesn't matter if South Carolina doesn't beat Clemson next week. Like, there's no playoffs if South Carolina doesn't win. And that's why this game in Death Valley will basically be a playoff game, in my opinion. It will have that feel to it, which I think really helps the team that wins that game, because if one of them ends up making the playoff, it's like, hey, they've already basically played a playoff game at that point. So, look, we could say what we want. I think South Carolina right now is in a good spot. I think they're going to probably need a little bit more help. You need another domino to fall, in my opinion. And I think what you look at it as is, number one, South Carolina needs to take care of business. Beat Clemson, leave no doubt, number one. Number two, I don't know if it's possible, but you probably need a team like Tennessee to lose. You need Tennessee to lose to Vanderbilt, which is possible because it's in Nashville. And I don't think Tennessee is, again, I don't know if Tennessee's cracked up to be what everyone makes them out to be. Yes, they have a great defense. Yes, they got a good rushing attack, but they got problems, man. It's clear. And we'll see what happens, but you probably need like a Tennessee to lose. You probably need like a Georgia to lose, but I don't know if that's possible considering they get Georgia Tech in Athens on Friday. And you need some other teams to lose. So, look, someone else at some point probably has to lose a game in front of South Carolina. And it wouldn't shock me if you see that happen, especially during rivalry week. This is a good point brought up by Travis Edwards. If SoCal beats Notre Dame, Tennessee loses to Vanderbilt, and Maryland beats Penn State, I mean, oh, well, that in that scenario, yeah, for sure. Most definitely. And one other game I forgot to bring up that it wasn't a loss, but Penn State snuck out of Minnesota with a 26-25 win. Look, that would have changed a lot of things too. But I mean, it is what it is. Penn State won, and they're still a top 4 team. But if stuff like this happens, I think you got a shot. Like, you need more. The more chaos you can get, the better your odds are. But again, none of this matters. This conversation will be nothing if South Carolina doesn't take care of Clemson next week. That is what you have to do. Priority number 1. So we'll see. And no, I've not said that, but I think in some cases, my point is, if they played the schedule that Indiana did, or they played an ACC schedule, they'd have a better record right now, potentially. Like that I think that's kind of true. But right now, like, they're in the SEC and they're playing really well. I mean, they've shown that they can compete in this conference outside of one game this season. So, look, there's an argument to be made that, again, it's a discussion that shouldn't even need to be had, honestly. Like, again, it is hypothetical, like Ian says. It's a waste of time. But you know what? Look, I think the point is you stack up apples to oranges, Indiana versus South Carolina. I mean, who are you guys picking? Take your bias out of it with South Carolina. You look at it just objectively speaking, South Carolina looks like a better football team than Indiana. So, again, you probably need a few things to happen, like I said, but you got to take care of business against Clemson. And this game is going to be massive. I mean, outside of potential CFP implications, this should be a top 15 game, which would be the first since 2013, which was the last year of the notorious 5-game winning streak against Clemson for South Carolina. And does this feel to y'all like the biggest game in the rivalry's history? Like, I know there's been a lot of big games out there, but as I mentioned kind of at the beginning, like, none of these games had, like, at least since I've been alive, like since 2000, like 11, 12, 13, those were all huge ranked matchups. But because of the BCS format at the time, I mean, South Carolina probably wasn't, neither of those teams, win or lose, weren't getting into the national championship game because it was just the 2 best teams and it's all computer and stuff. But this game, it could have those playoff odds of, like, winner of that game. Who knows? And here's the thing. Like, again, if Clemson wins, that's 10-2. And if Miami loses to Syracuse, Clemson gets into the ACC title game. And if they win that, they're automatically in the playoff. But this game, just on the surface, just on the merit alone, this game should definitely have the biggest feel. It should feel like a playoff game without question. And I think it really helps that South Carolina gets to play this game at noon. If this were a night game, I don't know about y'all, but like, I think Clemson would definitely, I'd be feeling a lot more like, okay, South Carolina's gonna have a tough time winning. It's not impossible, but I feel like going in there at night would be a lot tougher, and like, it would take a lot more like crazy plays, I think, and stuff. And that's not to say it won't in a noon game, but like, I think you look back at 2 years ago, that was a huge game where Clemson was on the doorstep of going to the playoff, and they were number 8 in the country, I think. And South Carolina went in there and pulled off the 31-30 upset that we all still talk about to this day. And I think this game is just going to be massive. Like, playoffs or not, it's not. This game's obviously about state pride and stuff, but and a trophy. But like, this is way more than that for people that live in the state. It's 365 days of the year where you got to hear. I know how sick and tired y'all get of hearing about Clemson and stuff, and those fans probably like what's the word you guys would use to describe them? Like nauseating. Like again, it, that's probably the case. Like that's the way it is on both sides. Like Clemson fans don't like South Carolina fans, and South Carolina fans don't like Clemson fans. That's the way it's been. And this week, it might be the biggest game in rivalry history. We will see what happens. Clemson has been, to be fair, I think Clemson's had a pretty solid year. They obviously lost to open the year against Georgia, getting blown out in that game. But I think since then, you take out the Louisville game, you can also argue they haven't played anyone really tough, but I mean, let's give credit where it's due. They did respond after the Louisville loss with two tight wins against Virginia Tech and Pitt, both on the road. And I mean, look, they're in a position to where maybe a few weeks ago, without help around the country and stuff, that maybe Clemson wasn't going to be a playoff team with two losses, but like they're right in the mix too, y'all. Like I think they're right there to where winner of this game, the conversation is going to be had with the committee. Like, can you leave one of these teams out if they win the Palmetto Bowl? I think that's where we're heading, and this is going to be a tough game because Clemson, Cade Klubnik, I think has been I didn't think he was that good last year, but I mean I think that he's been pretty slept on this year, to be honest. Like he's kind of having a decent year. He's got 29 touchdowns, 4 interceptions. I mean, he doesn't he doesn't have like insane numbers, but it's like he does enough to seemingly help his team win. And he didn't play great against Georgia. That was back in August. As of late, I mean, he's done what he's needed to do, and he's had a few games where he's thrown up for more than 300 yards, and he's taking care of the teams like a lot. So got to give him credit there. He's definitely been impressive this year. And again, Clemson has had some quarterback struggles with DJU not really living up to the hype. And Cade last year, I don't think was that good. But this year, again, Ian brings up the point. He's having a much better year. And the running game has been really solid for Clemson. Like Phil Maffa, that might be the biggest challenge for South Carolina in this game. To stop Clemson's rushing attack might be where this game could be like decided. Like Rocket Sanders versus Phil Maffa. Who has the better running day? I said it on 107.5 the game earlier this week. I have a feeling Tyler and I had the discussion of, okay, Rocket Sanders is a couple, like, I can't remember what the exact total is, but it's like 200 something yards away from getting to 1,000 on the season. And he'd be the first running back since, I believe, Kevin Harris and the first running back in the Beamer era to have 1,000 yards rushing. I think he can get there, and I think it's going to happen with a great performance against Clemson. Again, legends are made in these games. Like, we talk about all the heroes from these games, man, and like the Clownies, the Swearingers, the Connor Shaws, the Nicky Minwari, and all these other guys like Kai Kroger. We still talk about Kai Kroger, a freaking punter to this day for his performance against Clemson. We talk about all these heroes from these games. And so you need someone to step up on Saturday. And with so much on the line, I think you're going to get these guys really playing their hearts out. Rocket Sanders is one I definitely anticipate having that career type of day where he leaves it all on the line. And if South Carolina's going to win this game, I would expect him to be a big part of why. But yeah, like I said, Phil Maffa, that has to be priority number one, slowing him down in the rushing game. He hasn't done much lately. He really hasn't. Like Pitt, he had 17 carries for 17 yards. He had 14 yards against Citadel yesterday. But, I mean, before that, Virginia Tech, 128. Louisville, 171, 2 touchdowns. He's had 6 games this year with more than 100 yards rushing. He's got 8 touchdowns. So he is going to definitely be someone that if South Carolina gives them holes, like if Clemson's O-line blocks well against South Carolina's D-line and provides holes to run through, that is going to be an issue, I think. And again, EXO brings up a good point. The run defense struggled against Missouri 2 weeks ago. And that can kind of be like, okay, South Carolina won the game because their offense stepped up at the end and the defense still made enough plays, but you can't be letting a team like Clemson rush for a lot of yards. And you can't be letting Cade Klubnik. No, he's a mobile quarterback to an extent, but I mean, look, you can't be letting him flush out of the pocket and make plays with his legs. Like, you're not going to win this game if Phil Maffa runs for $150 and Klubnik's running how he wants to and he's throwing for nearly 300 yards. You won't win this game that way. I expect South Carolina's defense to come out playing like they have all year. And I think it's going to be a really tight game. This game has all the implications. And I forgot to even bring this up. Great point by R.L. Smith. Lots of NFL scouts and bowl game officials are going to be at Carolina-Clemson. Yes, I would expect that to be the case. I will let you guys know on the Insiders Forum if I see any bowl game officials there. I didn't see any last night, but I think it was, 2 weeks ago against the Missouri game where Citrus Bowl game officials, Cheez-It Bowl, if you will, officials were there, and they were talking to Shane after the game. So I feel like, look, if South Carolina finishes 9-3 and doesn't make the playoff, I think the Citrus Bowl is probably a lock. I know that was a question I got asked earlier. What bowl game is South Carolina going to go to? If they don't go to the playoff, I think Citrus Bowl has to be right there. Think about it this way. Yeah, maybe Alabama and Ole Miss finished the year ranked ahead of South Carolina in the rankings going into the bowl games and stuff. But think about it this way. Are those fan bases going to want to travel after their team got knocked out of the playoff? I don't think so. I don't think so. I remember going to the Gator Bowl as a fan 2 years ago, and I don't really remember much from that day. I'm not going to get into why. It was a fun day, but I mean, that place, I do remember this. That place was packed with South Carolina fans. I think I literally said it at the time, and I'll say it again. That Gator Bowl against Notre Dame felt like a home game. It felt like Williams-Brice Stadium down south. That is, like, seriously, that place was insane. And I think that's what you're going to get, regardless of where South Carolina goes for its 13th game of the year. I think that's what you're going to get, especially if it's a game out in Florida. Gamecock fans will travel well, and I think that's why, if it comes down to, okay, South Carolina is not going to the playoff, what's the bowl game they can go to? I think the Citrus Bowl has to be a lock for them for sure. And it also helps, like, Carolina's an underdog going into this Clemson game. Last I checked, what are they, like a 3-point underdog or whatever it is? That benefits them, man. Let the so-called gambling experts favor Clemson this game. It doesn't matter at the end of the day, but, like, I mean, let South Carolina be the underdog. If anything, it inclines you to put money on South Carolina to win this game, especially if you're feeling good about it. Like, shoot, I might. Like, I mean, maybe not, but, like, if I were in a position to, I would. Like, honestly, if I got money to whale around like that, and I'm feeling good, like, absolutely. And so, look, I think let everyone disrespect South Carolina. If they don't get the right spot in the rankings this week, and I'll talk about here in a second, okay. Like, if Ole Miss and Alabama are ahead of South Carolina in the rankings and Clemson's ahead, okay, whatever. Like, it is what it is. Go out here, win this game next week, and leave no doubt you will move up in the rankings if you beat Clemson. Undoubtedly, that game is gonna hold a ton of value moving forward, and it could be the one that decides, okay, South Carolina going to the playoff or not. Like, reality, like, it is possible. A lot of chaos happened yesterday. A lot could happen again on Saturday. And with rivalry week, man, I wouldn't leave anything off the table. I wouldn't leave Auburn beating Alabama off the table. I wouldn't leave – I don't know who we want to win this game. Texas A&M. A&M might come out from the dead and win that game and kind of knock Texas out of the picture for sure. I mean, look, this is rivalry week, man. Crazy things happen. You could go 0-11 in a year, win that Clemson game, or just any game in general in the rivalry week, and your season's a success. Like, that is what this week is all going to be about. And it's going to be nuts. It's going to be crazy. As for where I think they'll be ranked, I think I mentioned it earlier, but in case you're just now tuning in, I appreciate all you guys tuning in for sure. It's awesome getting to talk with you guys on here. And this is a nice discussion to have, to be honest. I think somewhere probably around 13 to 15 is where South Carolina will be ranked. Again, it really depends on how far are you dropping Indiana, Bama, and Ole Miss. And where they drop, because they are going to drop, how many of them are ahead of South Carolina and Clemson? Do you put maybe Clemson at 12, Ole Miss at, like, I don't even know, Bama at 13, and then South Carolina at 14, and then Ole Miss at 15? I don't know what you do, but I just have a feeling that these teams that lost yesterday, some of them are going to be ahead of South Carolina. Colorado, BYU, and A&M, no, they're going into the 20s. Some of them might even drop out of the rankings, to be honest. But I think South Carolina, they're still going to get a little bit of disrespect, I think. But I think putting money on it right now, I'm saying South Carolina is at 14 come Tuesday. And what's going on, my man? Mike Uva. Be the underdog. Be the lower-ranked team. Heading into Clemson game. You win. It just makes that win look much better to the committee. Spot on, man. You make me want to run through a brick wall right now, man. I appreciate you tuning in. And we'll get you on this show again soon enough here. If craziness happens next week in Death Valley, next Sunday's Sunday reset. Oh boy, that's gonna be a fun stream. But we gotta get there first. Mike says South Carolina will be ranked 15. I agree. I think it's possible. 14, 15 sounds about right. Alabama, I don't know what's going to happen to Alabama. And same thing with Ole Miss. Like, these two teams lost to kind of bad football teams yesterday. Like, yeah, Florida's been playing better, and Oklahoma hasn't really been playing well this year. But these are teams that are barely making it to a bowl game this year. How can you reward a team by only dropping them 2 to 3 spots when they have the same amount of losses at South Carolina? And yes, I get it, the head-to-head. But, man, that was so long ago to where it's like, what have you done for me lately shouldn't matter. Like, you're playing your best football right now. You're playing better than any SEC team in the country right now. And I get, again, moral victories are probably not going to even matter in this case. And I don't think the committee's going to care that South Carolina got screwed over in the LSU game. But it's like, man, like, they've played just about as well as anyone right now. And I think they deserve to just be right in the mix. They deserve a seat at the table, in my opinion, if they finish this year 9-3. So, look, South Carolina probably should have won both these games against Bama and LSU, and we wouldn't even be having this. Like, we'd be talking about, okay, where are they going for the playoff? Not if they're going to make the playoff. Like, we would be talking differently right now. And a lot of people are going to say at the end of the year, if South Carolina doesn't make it, like, oh man, that LSU game, that's gonna be something talked about forever, man. Like, the biggest what if in South Carolina history might be that LSU game if Carolina doesn't make the playoff, and rightfully so. But you know what? This team playing their best football, and we'll see what happens. We'll see what happens, man. It's gonna be totally different. Like, this team's different. I think things are gonna just roll South Carolina's way. Ian says, Jack, I thought you were being wishy-washy on Friday when you guys went around the SEC, but it unfolded like you said. Yeah, look, I should have picked Florida in staff picks this week. I didn't, because I'm seeing everyone else pick Ole Miss, and I'm like, maybe I picked against Ole Miss earlier this year in the Arkansas game. I was proven way wrong. But I think I said it on Thursday or Friday. I just said, like, I got that feeling about Florida, man. Something's going to happen, and it wouldn't shock me if Florida won. And I was right. And then Auburn. I picked Auburn to beat A&M yesterday. Something about it, man. The SEC is just different this year. And it's all these teams beating up on each other. And it's chaos, man. It's chaos. EXO says, Bama losses are much worse than – yes, of course. Bama lost to two common opponents that South Carolina demolished. South Carolina beat Oklahoma 35-9, and they also beat Vanderbilt 28-7. Alabama lost to both those teams, and again, they both were on the road. These games, like just like Alabama was, these games were both on the road. So look, I know we're gonna want to talk about Alabama beating South Carolina by 2 points and stuff, but man, like lately, it's like South Carolina is playing much better football than Bama. It wouldn't shock me if Alabama got into the playoff. It's just we've seen it over the years, man. The committee, maybe it's because of Saban. Maybe it'll be different now with Kalen DeBoer. I don't think this Bama team deserves to get in, but let's not rule it out that the committee's put Alabama in before. But now it's like it could happen again to where if one team, if they're going to pick one team to get into the playoff, let's say it does come down to Ole Miss, Bama, and South Carolina. Realistically, let's see. Like if it does, who does the committee pick? I think they should pick South Carolina, just truthfully speaking, because they're playing the best football of the three right now. But when you look at the head-to-head and stuff, and you want to incorporate that stuff, again, I truly don't know what the committee looks for. Like, does head-to-head matter? It seemingly did when LSU dropped behind South Carolina. Does strength of schedule matter? Obviously not right now, since Indiana's probably still going to be in the top 12. Like, what does matter? And I'm really curious to figure that out more on Tuesday when we see the official CFP rankings drop. And the AP poll, like the AP poll is going to come out today. I could care less about that thing. Like it's cool. It's a metric, but like it's numbers. But like the real thing is the college football playoff poll. And the last time I'll bring it up here, I think South Carolina probably gets ranked somewhere between 13 to 15. But if I'm picking a spot, literally, I'm going to say 14. I think that's probably you move up 4 spots in the CFP rankings. Sounds about right. It just depends on, okay, where do the big brands go? Like, where does Ole Miss go? Where does Alabama go? Because you know the committee loves Alabama for whatever reason, even though they've had 2 terrible losses this year. And look, South Carolina is just going to get counted out. I feel like it's always if it were South Carolina, I saw someone bring this up on like Twitter yesterday. If it were South Carolina, let's say South Carolina's in Alabama's shoes, where not to compare and contrast and stuff, but hypothetically speaking, if South Carolina was in Alabama's shoes yesterday and had the record they had, and then lost that game to Oklahoma, and then Alabama's the team like South Carolina right now going on all these wins and stuff, I guarantee you Alabama would be ranked ahead of South Carolina. And I think it's going to be the same this week, to where South Carolina is not going to be ahead of Alabama and Ole Miss. I think that maybe, but I don't see it being ahead of both. But we'll see. And yes, I think the only thing South Carolina is going to care about, the team itself, the program, the players, the coaches, they're just going to be focusing on them. Like all they can do is control what they can control, go 1-0. And then I'm sure deep down they hope chaos happens. Like you don't think Shane Beamer was probably in his house yesterday cheering for chaos to happen? They know what they need, and they need things to happen, and they got it yesterday. And considering this game's at noon on Saturday, if South Carolina wins, I mean, look, they're going to go back to they're going to drive the bus back to the facility after the game and all that. But I mean, maybe I don't know what they're going to do, but it wouldn't shock me if they are like, I mean, look, Clemson's going to be watching that Miami-Syracuse game for sure, win or lose. But because they're done with ACC play. So if Miami loses, Clemson's going to the ACC championship, I believe. But I think for South Carolina, they're just worrying about what they can control, man. Like, if it happens, it happens. If it doesn't, like, okay. Like, obviously everyone's going to be pissed if it doesn't happen. But it's like you've done all you can. And I think that is the biggest thing. Like, the final point I'll kind of make before wrapping this thing up is, look, if South Carolina doesn't make the playoff, if they do finish the year 9-3 and they go to a bowl game, it's still a great year. It is a great year for Carolina. Like, they have had an absolutely fantastic season. I just remember sitting at Williams-Brice Stadium last year after South Carolina finished the year 5-7, losing that game to Clemson. I'm like, where the heck is this team going from here? What is next? Because I really didn't know what the direction was, because Everyone's talking about, oh, South Carolina's taking a step back. They haven't played well. What's next? They've gone out here and shocked a lot of people. And my prediction coming into the season was 8-4 for South Carolina. It's right on track right now, but I hope I'm wrong because I hope South Carolina does win this week to finish the year 9-3. But the turnaround they've had in a year is really good. And here's the other thing, man. It might feel like this is the end of the road, like win, lose, whatever happens the rest of the year. Like this might be a one and done type of team to where it's like, oh, you're losing all these guys and you're not getting most of your defense back, and all these seniors are leaving. But you've got a lot of recruits coming in. You're going to go into the transfer portal and replace what you're losing. I think South Carolina is going to be set up for a nice future. And as long as you have 16 at quarterback, you're going to have other pieces out there. You're getting some guys back too. Let's not forget about that. Like you're going to get some guys back too on defense and offense. So yeah, you might be losing a lot of talent next year, but you're going to also get a lot of guys back, and you're going to replenish in the transfer portal and with the class of 2025 in high school recruiting. So I think South Carolina is set up for long-term success. I think we'll see what happens, but again, just enjoy the ride right now. Whatever happens, South Carolina is having a great year, and it can be a perfect November for number one, but it can also be one of those great years in program history amongst the best. South Carolina hasn't won 9 regular season games since 2013, and they haven't won 10 games since that same year where they won 11 3 straight years in a row. I think it's only happened like 5 times in program history where the Gamecocks have won 10-plus games. It can happen over these next 2 games. We'll have to see, but it is going to be a really fascinating week. South Carolina is playing Clemson noon on ESPN next week out in Death Valley. I'll be there. It is going to be I'm really excited for this, man. Like, I know I got a lot of heat for going to hang out with my family and go see a Clemson game earlier this year. Like, again, I was there to scout out Clemson maybe, and because I didn't think Clemson was that good at the time, and I think South Carolina can definitely beat them. But this will be my first time covering a South Carolina-Clemson game on the other side out in Death Valley. That's going to be nuts. It's going to be crazy, but it really is going to be like a high-stakes game, and it's going to be nuts. Like, it's going to be insane. The hype this week's going to be crazy. Like, again, just enjoy what's going on right now. I said it yesterday after the game. Enjoy the process, and whatever happens, as long as South Carolina does whatever it can, I mean, you can't be too upset about that. Like, yeah, you can be upset about the refs and stuff and the shouldas and wouldas and stuff, but I think South Carolina has had a great year, and it can be one of those special years if things continue to roll the way they have been. R.L. Smith says, what is the recruiting ceiling for this team? Top 10? I think for sure. Like, I think they're doing really solid in recruiting right now. And National Sign Day is December 4th. I mean, it's right around the corner, y'all. And I think for this team, like, who wouldn't want to come play for South Carolina after this season? Like, if you're a recruit watching this, like, and I know the comments can explain this as well, but it's like who you see this team, and it's like, who wouldn't want to come play for Shane Beamer, man? Like, he's a great coach, and he seems like a real great guy to play for. Like, who wouldn't want to be a part of that? And who wouldn't want to be the piece that, hypothetically speaking, if South Carolina doesn't get to the playoff, who doesn't want to be that piece that helps South Carolina get to the next step? You know what I mean? So, look, it's a lot of talk about being optimistic and stuff, and I get it. Like, let's not jinx it like EXO says. I'm feeling uncomfortable being so optimistic. I know it's from the norm, but it's a conversation that I felt like needed to be had. And again, this conversation is all for naught if South Carolina doesn't win next week. But that's the beauty of it. They've got a chance, and we'll see what happens. It's going to be a really fun week. Happy Thanksgiving to all of you guys. We will be doing all of our normal coverage on GC throughout this week. Be sure to stay locked into it on Gamecock Central. Stories, videos, live streams. I know Wes and Chris are going to be going live tomorrow to break this game down and further go off of what I've already talked about today with this big week ahead. in Rivalry Week and all the scenarios and all the craziness. We'll have live updates from press conferences. We'll have all great coverage on GC. It's going to be a lot of fun. If you're not subscribed already to GamecockCentral.com, like I asked before or said before, do it. Do it. Do it. I mean, I don't know how many times I got to say it. Just do it. Literally, Nike, just do it. Like, this is the right time to do it, guys. Like, I'm hoping most of y'all are already subscribers to Gamecock Central, but like, just do it. It's the best time. So we'll see what happens. It's going to be a great week, regardless, I think. So I appreciate it, Rob. Thank you so much. Again, and also subscribe to the YouTube page. It's free. All you got to do is click one button. Hit the like button while you're at it if you're enjoying what you've heard today. It's pretty easy. Just do it. It takes 2 seconds. So yeah, again, South Carolina will be at Clemson noon next Saturday, noon Eastern on ESPN. Live updates, coverage, all that good stuff to come from Death Valley. And we're going to have a great week, and it's going to be a lot of fun. Get ready, y'all. It's finally here. Rivalry Week, Week 14 of the college football season. The Palmetto Bowl is back. I will see you guys next Sunday. I'll see you guys first on Wednesday. Kendall and I will be going live for GC Live. We'll break down what the coordinators had to say, and we'll break down this matchup ahead. And then next Sunday, we will be going live, win, lose, or draw, Sunday reset. It will be a lot of fun. Hopefully, we are talking about another big Gamecock win. And if you also want to hear me talk about this game and what is to come, check me out every day, 9 to 10 a.m., 107.5 The Game. You guys are the best. Thank you guys for tuning into this stream. It's been a long one, but I thoroughly enjoy getting to do what I do, even on minimal sleep. Take care, guys. Have a great week. Happy Thanksgiving, and I will see you guys again soon. You guys are the best. I'll see you soon.